On behalf of the Florida Staffing Association, I'm excited about introducing our next guest. My name is Jamie Arns. I'm the National Staffing Manager for Everest Recruiting. I'm also the board member of the Florida Staffing Association and the co-director of the Orlando Social Committee. So we're very excited to present our next guest to you. He's going to be talking a little bit about background checks in today's world. As you know, it changes on a daily basis. Just as a reminder, we are going to do the full presentation. You can enter all of your questions in the chat box, and we will have a question and answer session at the end. So feel free to go ahead and get your questions going so that we're ready for the Q&A session. So please allow me to introduce our next speaker. Rashid Zahidi is the CEO of Sentinel Background Check and is president of Sentinel Data Retrieval. He is the author of a book, The Business Immunity Systems, The Pitfalls and Side Effects of Data Handling, Privacy Issues and Background Checks. He is also the learning chair for the EEO Tampa and previously served as the finance chair and integration chair at the Central Florida chapter of Entrepreneurial Organization. Expert appearances and contributions include being featured in CLTV Chicago, Fox Baltimore, Inc.com, Florida Trend, The Background Buzz, Octane Magazine, and ESPN Radio, and numerous other programs. I'm very excited to present Rashid Zahidi with Sentinel Background Checks.
Well, hello, and thank you very much, Jamie, for the intro, and thanks for everybody who contributed to putting this together. Shout out also to Paula. I don't know if she's on there. Of course, Sean, Diane, and also I believe someone I know, Jewel, is also on here. So hello, everybody, and hello to the rest of you that I haven't met yet. As the adage goes, we often need not be told, but we often need to be reminded. So my goal today is to just do an overview of the background checks and the different products, and also go over a little bit of the pitfalls and the things that typically get people into trouble, whether it's the CRAs, which is the Consumer Reporting Agencies that most of you use for background checks, or also employers or any people that handle the background check process. Of course, I do also want to remind everybody that, of course, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not dispensing legal advice here. So we always recommend to people that, of course, they review their process and their procedure with their lawyers, legal department, or appropriate HR person internally. So with that out of the way, I think we're all, most of us are entrepreneurs, or we're concerned with hiring people. One of my favorite quotes in regards to this is one conveyed by Buffett, and talks about the three qualities that one should look for in hiring, and that's integrity, intelligence, and energy. And he says this, and it's funny. And if you don't have the first, the other two will kill you. Because of course, if you have someone who has the energy but doesn't have the integrity, so good luck chasing them and pinning them down. But anyways, this applies to hiring in general, because we are just one component of the hiring process. We are the due diligence, but you who are the staffing is another bigger part in the hiring and the selection process. And of course, most people should leave that to the professionals, and that's you. So anyways, with that, another three big components really that we're concerned with is, of course, maximizing value for our clients, and of course, maintaining control with our process and procedures, and minimizing the risk. This applies to entrepreneurship. This applies to running any business. This applies to what we do in all the different steps of the hiring process. With that being said, now let's get a little bit into the overview of the different components of a good background check. So one note about this is, like, so much has changed, yet so much remains the same. The main components are still the same. So of course, you have your identity checks, where you want to make sure you do your social trace. You want to make sure maybe validation of ID, and of course some components are done in person, because of course if we start this wrong, then we're just looking for the wrong information, garbage in, garbage out. So of course we want to make sure we have the right person, but we also want to make sure we check in all the right places. And then, of course, the verifications, and that applies to verifications of history, of employment, of credentials. We've all heard those stories, even at your household name types of companies, where it's been at highest levels, of course, where it's been found out that a person said they had a degree or a credential that it turns out they didn't have. There's been cases like even I recall one, Sean, in South Florida, where there was a doctor or a fake doctor who presented fake credentials and was going around giving people breast exams. So you can get that crazy, anyways, with the credentials. And of course, the criminal is another big component of that, and that of course includes counter-criminal searches, includes instant database sweeps, which of course they are pulling from departments of corrections, they are pulling from arrest records, they are pulling from all the different counties that allow that. Some of them do, some of them don't. But anyways, but all these resources they're pulling from. But of course, we always recommend with that, if you do those types of products, that you always vet the information at the source, as we will talk about later. That'll save you from the trouble. There's a proper way to use them, of course, and another way that gets people into trouble. And I always like to say, whatever you do, it has to be reasonable and it has to be commensurate with what you're hiring for. Like for instance, the DMV records, motor vehicle records and things like that. If the person is not going to be driving for you, if they're not going to be driving your vehicles, that is not justified from a cost perspective, but also from a reasonable kind of perspective. If they ever throw a fit, you cannot say that was commensurate with the job qualifications or specifications. We talked a little bit about eligibility verification, and that's of course most employers do this themselves. And with E-Verify, and of course there's all kinds of documents that you have to do. There's I-9 compliance that comes into play, and of course, thanks to technology, most of that can be streamlined nowadays. And of course, a big component of that is the interviewing process, which all of you are experts at. And some people incorporate the scientific testing, and of course the drug testing. If someone's going to be operating machinery, or most employers have a drug-free workplace. So of course that comes into play. And there is all of these additional products that are, but really the bread and butter of it is this. But there is of course other things like social media screening and other products, which if we have time, maybe we'll touch a little bit on those. Maybe they'll come up in the trends as well. And of course, you all know the statistics, so I won't spend too much on this. Of course, everybody who measures any of these things. And I believe we will share these slides as well. If anybody's like really likes to look at these statistics or to use them with their clients, because believe it or not, you probably run into this. There are a lot of employers still that don't do what they're supposed to do, and they still don't see the benefit of leaving things to the professionals, whether it's be like recruiting and staffing, leaving that to your industry, or whether it be like doing due diligence, sitting in front of the computer, doing a Google search is not a background check. So same thing with doing the right staffing. But anyways, there's plenty of statistics, of course, about the importance of hiring the right people and doing the right due diligence. I'll touch a little bit on these, but again, you guys are pros, so you know most of this, but there may be a couple of people in there that maybe are new or not familiar with the different products. So of course, Social Security Trace, it scans usually the credit headers and other sources of information, and it will yield like the person's aliases, the AKAs, or also known as, because again, it's garbage in, garbage out. When we go to search these things, most of them you have to punch in the name. That's how you know. That's how you get to search. So of course, if you put in the wrong name, you're gonna miss stuff. So of course, that's one of the things that it does. The other thing that it does is it also yields the jurisdictions. In the jurisdictions where this person has maintained an address, has gone to school, has worked, and anywhere that we need to be looking. And the county-specific criminal records, of course, that's where most of your felonies and misdemeanors are housed. We usually have to at least hit the county seat. And then, of course, we supplement with all the other instant products that are sweeping all these other sources. And of course, state and the criminal, there's the state repositories where they're not created equal. With some states, they're better than others. Let's say, for instance, in Kentucky and Montana, they're pretty good. But let's say if you go into Tennessee, and FDLA2 is pretty good. But you go to some places like Louisiana or other, good luck, because I mean, not everybody reports to them, not every county reports to them, and even the counties that report to them, they don't report to them regularly, and there is a big lag. So long story short, never a good idea to just rely on one of these things. Or a big misconception is a lot of people, they hear the statewide and they assume that it covers everything, but it doesn't. So there are a lot of holes in those. Of course, the sex offender registry, important to check that. Terrorist watch lists, and there's a bunch of other, products, instant ones, like from controller of the currency and other sanctions lists and things like that. Of course, drug screening, all the different panels, depending on what you're doing, whether you have to be DOT compliant and such. Again, I would spend too much time going down pigeonholes when it comes to this. And different consumer and credit reports. We talked a little bit about the other reports here. I'm just scanning through this here because maybe you can't see my face, just to see if there's something I need to touch on real quick. But anyways, one thing that people always should keep in mind is also who are you working with and who's handling this whole process. You have to know your provider, you have to know their credentials, and you have to know their standards and commitment level. They need to look out for you, and they need to look out for both organizations, actually. And I'm sure you've seen the statistics many times, but over 325 million spent by CRAs and employers to settle background check related lawsuits over the last 10 years. And typically, I think it was about 50-50. I think about maybe 175 spent by one or the other, and the rest balance spent by the other between employer and CRAs. But most of these things have to do usually with the with three main things. Typically, it's either over-reporting, where people are violating the FCRA by reporting stuff that should not be reported, or they are under-reporting, and then of course then they get sued because of workplace violence or other things, because they missed a record or they didn't look in all the right places. Or of course the wrong reporting, which is like reporting the wrong information. That is mismatching, that is attributing a record to someone it doesn't belong to because someone didn't check all the IDs. Especially the more serious the case, the more we want to look at other IDs. We've seen all kinds of situations after screening tens of millions of people. We've seen many situations of people with the same first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, but two different people. And after digging, that's the only way we were able to find out. But of course, that coupled with a sloppy process where there is no proper consent or no proper disclosure or adverse action, then the applicant never got the opportunity to point it out until it got worse, and then until it got to kind of a lawsuit kind of stage. So of course, both the employer and the CRAs, most of the times we're between a rock and a hard place. As you can see, if you go too far to one side, you can get sued. If you go too far to the other side, you can get sued. And of course, the risks are many, including the reputation. As we all know, it takes a long, long time to build a good reputation, but it takes a very, very short time to ruin it. So of course, we know the importance of the reputation. Of course, right to the bottom line, money loss, whether it's like what you're going to have to pay, opportunity cost, and whatnot. And of course, the smaller the business, the more likely that a big mistake like that can take them out of business, really, because some of the bigger companies, they may have set aside a budget for, those types of situations, but a smaller business may not be able to survive such a lawsuit. Of course, you've heard of workplace violence type of lawsuits and all kinds of lawsuits as well. So it's all, I always say to people, it's all about balance. So the process should be able to stand up to scrutiny. I think that's typically like the difference maker, knock on wood, if anything ever, is to go wrong. So CYA, always, and what made the difference in some of these situations where it got to lawsuits, and where some employers and some CRAs were able to defend themselves well, was because they had a good policy and procedure, and they were able to document that they did their best, and that they did what was feasible, possible, and legal, and up to them. And so, of course, after the policy and the procedure, what is all of that without compliance? So, of course, there has to be a compliance process. And the other thing that gets people into trouble, and that includes people like, Target, like Domino's Pizza, many household names that have gotten into trouble with this, is like not securing consent. And this can go wrong in many different ways, because I'll give you an example. Some of the ways people have gotten into trouble before is they say, well, we actually asked for consent, but they got into trouble because they put all of their disclosures and all their permissions and all the things in one document that was all crammed and huge. And so basically their process was taken apart, and the judge basically said, you have to make it clear and separate so they know what they're signing. So you can hide it in here, you can make it to where it's difficult to read, all of that. So there are many examples of where people have gotten into trouble with that. And of course, with the right partnership, your partner in that will point it out to you, and let you know. And most of the times, most of us, we have spent time doing those forms to be compliant. So when it comes to that, we kind of deal with that portion. And of course, the other part that gets people into trouble is the disclosure. And that's, whether it's adverse, pre-adverse, or these other points of failure where people didn't share the information as they're supposed to the point that there were a lot of there was a trend at a point where there was a bunch of lawyers that would put up these applicants to just go and request a copy of the report from all these different companies. And if they find one that had a sloppy process, or was taking too long, or was making it difficult for the applicants to get a copy of their reports, then they started working towards a class action lawsuit. So that was one of the trends that always threatens our industry. Both CRAs and employers have been targeted with this, like in this area of the disclosures. So of course, always doing the right thing. So if you're ever, God forbid, had to be put in front of a judge and jury, and they're asking you all these questions, can you show that you did the right thing, that you did your best to make sure that you are compliant with federal laws, state laws, and you are aware of all the different, obviously you can't claim ignorance when it comes to a lot of these things. I can't claim ignorance. Our employers can't do that either. So it's important to have the, an FCRA like compliance manual and all the other policies and procedures. So with that, I'm going to get a little bit into what's going on right now, some of the things we are seeing happening since the pandemic. So of course, again, a reminder, despite some adjustments, laws governing the CRAs remain unchanged. The FCRA is still there. EOC rules are still there. state laws, federal laws, they are all still there. Nothing has changed from that regard. So the one thing that where we have seen changes or adjustments is not all courts are operating at capacity. So some courts, of course, are operating with a smaller crew. Some of them close and then they open, and then when they open, they say, okay, it's by appointment only, or they say, okay, each researcher gets an hour or two, and then come back next week. So there are delays from that regard, especially if you don't have the right relationships and the right ways to kind of organize the work to where you can be efficient and effective and make the most of that limited time that you have now. And of course, the ones that are done by the clerks and the court personnel, they typically, in most jurisdictions, they will say, well, by law, we have up to 2 weeks or whatever, but some of them even do more. And some of them even, they can give information earlier, but they milk that 2 weeks. So anyways, so again, this is applicable to some of the jurisdictions that our clerk conducted. And we're always getting notices about state ordered lockdowns. And of course, that affects the turnaround when it comes to that portion. So I won't beat over that horse over there. Also, the educational institutions. We have noticed that some of them are taking longer because, of course, some of them have gone, virtual. Some of them have again gone to skeleton crew. Some of them, like, no one's answering the correspondence, whether it's phone, whether it's emails, whether it's anything. So of course, that's also an area where we've seen things sometimes get delayed. Areas where there is no, we haven't seen much of delays. Of course, things like all instant products, like motor vehicle records, with the exception of these states that have this cumbersome process where when you're trying to obtain records, but the majority of the other stuff, and of course, any instant products are all still good to go. Other things that we've seen the trends, and this is, of course, I'm drawing from like what I've seen as the trends, like the feedback. And we run a CRA, but we also run what's called in our industry a wholesale company, which actually serves other background check companies with their counter criminal searches. So we're getting the data from that. We're getting the data from the CRA side, but we're also getting the information from the PBSA, which is our professional association, the Background Screeners Association. So of course, with people working remotely, that affects both sides of the equation. That affects people who have to do the work and people who have to respond. And as you may have experienced, sometimes we have to hunt down people just to get the consent forms. I'm sure you've had to probably hunt them down to do your paperwork. So of course, I think this one is probably not a surprise to you. So some of the ground planes that are going on in the industry, and some of the things that people are looking at and they're trying to do to get around like those delays is, of course, like, for instance, some people, instead of by default doing the counter criminal searches, especially if they happen to be in these jurisdictions that are taking way longer, some of them are doing all these other instant products and only resorting to the county criminal to verify the information as required, of course, legally and by FCRA. Some employers are instituting rescreening or ongoing screening just so they can go back to it later. And of course, contingent offers are not new, but I think more people have been stressing them more because of course, in a lot of times people just have to get started, and sometimes something is being held back. And so So we've seen a lot of people just do more of that, do more of the contingent offers, and also do post employment type of screening. So depending again, this is not applicable for all kinds of industries, not applicable for all kinds of levels and types of job descriptions and such. So only where, of course, it makes sense. The other thing that may have affected some of you, our industry tends to go through consolidation. Every now and then there comes this period where there is a lot of consolidation, a lot of people being acquired, and then the M&A and activity affects performance in both directions, depending on the acquirer, of course, and the type. There's been, of course, there are some strategic acquisitions that maybe bring more value to the clients, and there are some that may be smaller specialty clients get lost in the shuffle, and as a result find themselves really dissatisfied with the drop in the level of attention and the level of service. So I don't know if any of you are affected by this or not, but we get these reports and we're seeing a lot of activity happening again this go around. I think from the probably middle of last year to still ongoing right now. And every now and then we get a notice of someone being acquired by a bigger company. Another potential threat to watch for, and I think that affects all of us, is commoditization and race to the bottom. Of course, what we all do is really a very important portion of the P&L for any employer. So of course, if they hire the wrong people, we all know the costs of that. But we've also seen people be threatened by some of the social justice movements. I'm not saying there's not anything wrong with that or whatever. There's, of course, some of these movements that are trying to do the right thing. But as with most things, there is, of course, those situations where they go a little bit overboard. And I've seen, like, for instance, some examples where they interacted with someone's employee about maybe a small, ADA issue, Americans with Disabilities Act or whatever, and they took the correspondence because maybe they spoke to an inexperienced person and somehow that didn't say the right thing. And so what they did is they took that correspondence and they put it out there and they blow it up in social media, and then it caught fire. And then all of a sudden this employer has to sit there and has to address that. So right or wrong, it's something that's obviously out there that kind of has to, we always have to keep an eye on. Of course, and that of course can feed into media threats as well. It's like most of these things, it's one or two stories away and sensationalism, and then they breed like a lot of controversy. So another trend we started seeing is there is some PE firms and money being put behind class action suits, and those not familiar with the process, that's basically where they go. They look for opportunities where they think there's going to be a win, and so they finance, they pay for the lawyers, they do all of this, of course, for a big payout down the line when the class action gets settled. Some employers, I think there's third parties that are also doing the social media screening and scoring, but most employers are still doing it themselves, just from their desk. It's I don't want to call it stalking, but but people are looking for, most people who are doing this properly, they are looking for really adverse stuff. Is someone a racist? Is someone like a big risk? Is someone out there putting offensive or has an aversion to violence or whatever? So those are some of the things. So some people are leveraging this, and of course, as more people are spending more time on social media. Of course, there is a lot. There is a lot to be gleaned from the proper use of social media to be able to tell someone's character and to be able to tell whether they're going to be a high risk for you or your reputation or your company. Other things that we've been hearing about is, of course, none of this is for sure. Some of these things are just conversations and discussions, because anytime that there's something like this, there's an opportunity for disruption. There's an opportunity maybe to switch some things. And also some people have been very unhappy with, like, say, for instance, the bigger companies that do the verifications, because some of them like really have been just unreasonable sometimes with either increasing the fees or really in the limits that they impose, and so on and so forth. So quite a few companies are trying to disrupt and improve that employee verification process and the existing options, whether it'll be like some more options as far as that is concerned, that like to compete with the work number or some of those other long existing options. And some people are even toying with the idea of vaccination tracking. So my initial thing with this one is that, like, of course, it may or it may not. Of course, we have to think of the legal pitfall. Become a reality. Some of them maybe just may just be speculation. So with that being said, I think I'm gonna have Jamie open it up for Q&A.
So Rashid, can you do us a favor? For some reason you froze on your very last slide. Could you quickly go back over that again? I'm so sorry.
Sure, yes. This one?
Yes, the vaccination. We did hear the point about you had talked about them doing tracking, but nothing after that.
Yeah. So I was saying that some of these things are just they're just conversations. There's of course a lot of people exploring them. There's money behind it and all of those things. So did you hear the part about like the work number trying to maybe make an alternative for the work number and the verification?
Oh no. No, I did not.
Okay. Yeah. So so some of the things that people are looking at is that, of course, quite a few people have been unhappy with both the fees that have been imposed by the big verification companies like the work number and such, and not to pick on them, but anyways, there's no going around that. So some people are looking at different ways to disrupt that and maybe improve the employee verification process. And I know more than two companies that are looking actually with plenty of money behind them, trying to do something better and something more reasonable and more effective and efficient. So I'm hopeful that maybe one of them succeeds or both of them succeed in coming up with an alternative. Some are also toying with the idea of vaccination tracking, just like a kind of a database to, as you see people walking around and showing their cards and vaccinated and whatnot. And of course, there is a whole other discussion to be had about what employers can do and what they can't as far as imposing like the requirement to be vaccinated and so on. But anyway, some people are toying with having some kind of database. And of course, some of the challenges to overcome is the legal pitfalls and the clashes with the with the HIPAA and with the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and discrimination laws and such. So that's just, again, just giving you a little bit of from behind the scenes, some of the things that are out there that we hear about that may be coming. They may be, they may not. So anyways, so with that, I think Jamie, I think we're at that point. Probably we should allow time, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep, so if anybody has any questions, they can either, they can enter it into the chat box and we'll go ahead and ask them specifically. But Rashid, are you seeing the turnaround times for background checks getting back quicker now that more people are back in the offices or more often in their locations, or is that still by case?
I think it all depends on the products that you use and the jurisdictions. So of course, a component of it depends on the employer, the employee doing their part and submitting the forms and such. And like for instance, if you're doing drug screening, of course, the applicant has to show up and do all of those things. But all in all, outside of the county criminal searches in certain jurisdictions off the top of my head, there is significant improvements. And even in that area, we're starting to see more and more courts letting people and open up. So if I were to guess, I'd probably say within maybe a couple more months to 3 months, we may be at regular turnaround times. For the majority of our clients, we are really even right now, with the exceptions, of course, which there are always exceptions. And someone just asked to be admitted and I admitted them. So I'm guessing maybe you turned that over to me. I don't know.
That's okay. And then in regards to background checks and drug tests, when how do I want to word this question? Sorry.
That's okay.
Anybody else have any other questions that they would like to add? Ask Rashid while I figure out what my question was. I'm so sorry. One of the things I will let everybody know is that if you're an FSA member, you will be able to pull this recording offline, but we will send over the slide deck to you as well as Rashid's contact information, as well, so you can be able to reach out to him directly. And then if we don't have any other questions, I can let you guys get back to your day a little early. Maybe everybody in staffing will get a couple minutes extra for lunch or a break.
Yeah, so you see here, make sure there's some chat stuff here.
Yeah. How common are post background checks? I did get one coming in. Sorry. Running a background check after a hire.
They are becoming more and more common. That being said, I mean, it's like what's happening as well is more providers are coming up with better solutions. Now, of course, and a lot of times it doesn't mean you redoing everything from scratch, like from A to Z. So what's happening is that after you do the big comprehensive initial one, there is a couple of different models. There is, of course, people who redo that every 3 months. There are people who do it every 6 months. There are people who do it every year, depending on again, how sensitive the position is and whatnot. And there are those who just sign up to some of these products now. All they do is they every 3 months or every month even, for some people, they will run some of these instant products like database searches, like arrest records. And then if something gets flagged, then of course it triggers the whole background check again to make sure that you do it compliantly for that. Again, it's important to have this in policy and procedure. But we have employers that are doing it like every 3 months. We have people that are doing it a year, and we have people that just don't do it unless there is the next trigger, which is maybe someone gets promoted or someone switches positions or so on. And let me know if that didn't answer your question.
Is that is there a recommendation, or is it company by company, client by client?
Well, I think the important thing is to think from all these angles. What is the position, and what is the person doing?
Correct.
How much are you paying the person? What's the budget for the whole thing? As you know, of course, if someone is like at a minimum wage and they're maybe working in the back or in a warehouse or something, does it really? That's usually more like a business question for some people. But it becomes more of a legal one if someone is really working with the vulnerable. or whether it's the elderly or the kids, or it's more sensitive, then it starts becoming a little bit more legal. But yeah, that would, again, that I wouldn't say I recommend this or that, because all of these components have to be addressed.
Okay. I think that answers Gustavo's question about a frequent schedule, correct, Gustavo? Yes, okay,
Yeah,
perfect.
great question, thank you.
Okay,
Richie,
Sean had a question?
Yeah, I'll have a question. And we always like to, because on our webinars, we always bring people from so many different industries. We always like to ask this question. Besides, obviously, the turnaround time, what is one of the biggest changes or trends that you've seen in the past year because of, obviously the start of the pandemic? Or any trends or any challenges? No,
it's a great question, Sean. It's of course like some of these things we've talked about, and there may be opportunities too that may come out of this, again, because sometimes these things, they will shake the industry. And you probably heard that that quote, when the tide goes out, you'll see who's been swimming naked. So things like this can also expose processes that may not be the most efficient, like we were talking about, like the verifications process. A lot of times, you have to hunt people down. You have to make like 3 or 4 or 5 calls and maybe you may still not be able to get the information you need. So I think coming off of that, there may be opportunities. I mean, there may be opportunities to maybe digitize more records. Like, for instance, maybe as this even exposed like the challenges and the limitations of the old process of having to like hound the clerk to get the information. That shouldn't be happening anymore. This should be an ability to kind of do that. So if I were to sum it up, I think the challenges, of course, were mostly going to be temporary, because we're starting, I think, to get into the better part of it. But I'm hopeful that the opportunities will be capitalized on, and maybe some better processes and some better resources will come out of it, to where we're able to do this even faster and possibly cheaper.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for the question. That's great. Made me think.
Well, it's just interesting. It's just interesting to hear, because obviously us being in the staffing industry, we know our challenges, absolutely. But it's always interesting to see how every industry has, changed, or for the better, or what challenges or what trends they see. So it's just always interesting to hear from different people. So thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And if we have a little bit of time, I'd like to hear what you have seen from the staffing perspective, like as far as challenges or opportunities.
How much time do you have? No, I'm just kidding.
All right, I'll send you a separate Zoom link.
Obviously, I can start. It's obviously recruiting, number one. I mean, bottom line, recruiting is our number one issue. Because with the combination of unemployment and the stimulus payments, and unfortunately, people, it's just no choice but to step out of the working world. That's one of the challenges. And of course, you spoke about temporarily, we do a lot of office placements. So the one big concern when this all went down was, oh geez, what about all of our temporary employees? How are they going to work remote?
Right.
So I was very, very surprised, because I did not think that our clients would allow the temps to have equipment on site, but I was very pleasantly surprised at how many offices who didn't think that would happen, they made it happen. So, and it's because this has never happened before, and they had no other choice. So. Yeah,
it's true. Have you seen anything geographically, like any shifts, like has that opened up any new opportunities for you all? Like, because of course there's been traditionally places where the unemployment rate is higher, some are lower. And since some employers are more embracing the virtual, has that opened up any new opportunities for you all?
I mean, I think I would say it's kind of being from putting people at the employees' offices, it has turned around the other way. And now what happens if before if you couldn't travel to the customer and sit there on site and do whatever you were supposed to do for 3 days a week, then it was kind of not, well, maybe we're not interested. But now it's
Right.
the other way around. Now the employees are very happy to sit wherever they can sit. But if you're not a mature company that can offer remote work, and if you don't have that technology, then you have some catch up to do, because you won't get those brains to get there and do the stuff for you. So that's kind of what happened a lot, and I can see that, and it's especially within IT, I can see it. You get the virtual meeting and you're like, well, where are you from? Oh, I'm from South America. I'm from here. I'm from Spain. I'm from Italy. I'm from wherever. So that's what happened now. And nobody, there's not an issue that you're sitting remote. The only thing that's an issue is the time zone. And even that can be a good thing. So it really depends
Yes.
on. So, yeah.
No, that is true. That is true. Well, I do want to say for everybody that maybe I haven't linked up with. So if you want a copy of my book or anything, just send me an email. You won't get onto any mailing list or anything. I'll just mail you the book. Also, if if you're not linked with me and you want to link, basically I'm on LinkedIn, like my name, Rashid Zahidi. Link up with me and reach out. If I can be of any assistance, any questions in general regarding background checks or entrepreneurship, which is one of my passions from early childhood. So yeah, I'd love to connect with all of you and stay in touch. And let me know if there is anything I can do for you. And of course, we'll get these slides to you. And if you're interested in additional resources, if you're one of these people that likes to read the upcoming trends or things like that, or what's going on specifically with our industry or in general with hiring, I'm happy to always share some of the resources that I get. So let me know if you're interested in anything like that, and then I'll forward you some of the resources that I think may be insightful about what's going on now. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so very, very much, Rashid, for being a part of our presentation today. I do want to remind everybody that April 24th, April 28th, we have our next webinar with VentureX. We're going to be talking about the American Rescue Plan for 2021. Highly recommend that you guys join it. Registration is already out, so feel free to go ahead and log on to that. And we're super excited to have them on our next webinar. Also, check out our website, floridastaffing.net. That will allow you to see all of our upcoming webinars and future announcements. So thank you guys for coming today, and I hope to see you at the next webinar. On behalf of FSA, thank you so much.
Thank you, Jamie. Thanks,
Thank you,
everyone.
Rashid.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.